Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. And more importantly, welcome back to this special series of conversations that we are having here called the Future of Canadian Optometry, presented by Aequus Pharma. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sian. As always, I am truly grateful for you taking your time out of your day to join me here to learn and to grow, especially for this series of conversations that I think is going to be invaluable for us as optometrists in Canada to understand where our profession is going, what we need to know that's going well, what we need to be careful of, what we need to change, how we should approach the coming disruption and the changes that are inevitable, in fact, are happening as we speak. And today's interview is the second interview in this series of the Future of Canadian Optometry with Dr. Daryan Angle, who's Vice President of Business Development at Aequus, which is part of the larger New Look group. In the last episode, I interviewed Dr. Alan Alsifer, who's the CEO of FYI Doctors. And we really got a good perspective of this large organization, FYI Doctors, and what their presence is and what their plans are and what Al, being at the top of this organization, sees as our profession in the future. And Daryan was no different in that, being part of a larger organization, being in the leadership of this large organization, having a very different perspective of the profession as a whole and where we are going and what Aequus is doing within that profession. Now, keep in mind, the point of these interviews is not to promote these organizations. It's not to promote FYI or Aequus or Essilor or LensCrafters or anyone else. The point is to ask the leaders within these organizations the questions that we don't normally get a chance to ask. We will see a large organization making a move, making an acquisition, and say, well, what was the point of that? And what does that mean for me as an optometrist or a profession in the future? And that is exactly what I'm hoping to achieve with this series of conversations, to have the 2020 podcast as a platform to ask the hard questions, to ask the direct questions. What is your organization doing to support optometry? What is your organization doing to make sure optometry, the profession, thrives and that future optometrists have a strong profession that they are passionate about and want to be part of? And what are you doing about these things that are maybe not so positive? What about this thing that your organization did that didn't seem like it was actually a step in the right direction? And I hope that you'll see that, as I'm asking these questions, we are able to actually draw a lot of valuable insight, especially from guests like Al in the last interview, Daryan in this interview, who are willing to face the questions head on. They're not scared to take on those challenging questions. In fact, they invite them so we can learn about, what their perspective of the profession is. So today's interview is with Dr. Daryan Angle. And again, this is the second installment in the Future of Canadian Optometry series presented by Aequus Pharma. I hope you guys love it. And again, don't forget to share it. Put it up on Instagram, LinkedIn, send a text to your friend. Let them know that this conversation is happening so we can all learn and all thrive in the future. Okay, Dr. Daryan Angle, thank you so much for taking the time to join me for this very important, very special series of discussions that we're having on the 2020 podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, as you know, of course, you're here. You know that a couple months ago, I kind of put this call out through the podcast to various organizations in the country, to come on, invite them on and to chat about kind of where we're heading, what the changes are that are happening right now in the industry. Since then, since your response and others who have responded to me, I've been reaching out to colleagues across the country to kind of get the temperature collectively, nationally. How are we feeling? What's going on? What's on our mind? And of course, there's some obvious things. There's some elephants in the room, and then there's some subtle things that are kind of under the surface that seem to be very consistent when I'm having these conversations. So a lot of the questions we're going to cover today, discussion topics we're going to cover today, are those questions that have come from those conversations that I've had with my colleagues, our colleagues. And Daryan, yourself and the other guests, most of the other guests that we're going to have on for these conversations are in somewhat of a unique position. You're in a position that most of us are not, right? You're in a leadership position in one of these large organizations. You've seen, if not been directly involved in a lot of the change that's happened in our country, in our profession over the last decade or more, right? So I feel like you have, and our guests that are coming on will have this perspective that the majority of us will not. And I hope that we're able to have a candid conversation. I know you're comfortable with this. I hope you'll be able to share as much information as you can from this perspective that the majority of us do not have. And I understand there'll be some things that perhaps you got to hold close to the chest, but as much as you're comfortable sharing, of course, we will all appreciate that. So let's start with this. From your perspective, from that perspective, how would you describe the state of optometry in Canada right now?
Yeah, I would say optometry in Canada has never been so strong in terms of each province, the awareness in the public, the market share that's held by, the majority of provinces. Optometrists have been very good in terms of entrepreneurs. There may be some exceptions there based on regulatory history, but yeah, I think that over the last 10 years especially, there's been a lot of strong leadership in a lot of colleges and associations, and we're seeing the dividends of that hard work. Now, that's to say there aren't some headwinds coming that we have to be aware of, but I really do think, having been in practice 20 years, I'm an '01 grad, so I've seen a lot change in 10 years for the positive. So, and that certainly makes me proud. I mean, optometry is unique in Canada compared to the US, and certainly as a profession unique globally. But Canada, I think, in terms of all the sort of best attributes you could have in a health profession, I think we're fortunate. Well, and not just fortunate, I think we have to give ourselves credit for the effort as a collective that we've done as a profession. So yeah, to me, we're in a great spot at present time.
Well, I'm glad to hear you have such a positive outlook. Again, from this perspective of kind of however many 30,000-foot view that you might have that majority of us don't have, to feel that you feel that we're in a positive place. That's great. We'll talk a little bit more about where we think we're going and where we think we'll be down the road. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the other questions that are on our colleagues' minds. First of all, one thing that a common theme is a question about corporate versus private. And I'd like, if you could, define for me in your mind, what is private practice optometry? What is corporate optometry? And where does Iris and New Look as a larger brand fit within that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I personally, I've never really liked this sort of binary labeling of private versus corporate. I never really understood what corporate practice meant. I know there's some U.S. definitions thereof. Private practice to me is sort of completely independently owned by an optometrist, wearing all hats of all things in the practice, whether that's marketing, HR, just everything, all on the shoulders of the owner. That may or may not be affiliated with some kind of buying group, but just in terms of the actual function of serving the patient, that's sort of all on the individual. Where Iris sits, I would probably try to give us sort of a name. It would be more like a branded co-ownership model. So, being part of a brand that's national and having all the sort of the tools that a large group can wield, but having that ownership at a local level, having some entrepreneurial abilities to maneuver in your present market as a local owner, but using some of the tools that and maybe in other competitors are only there for really the benefit of a large corporate entities. So yeah, I feel we sit sort of in the middle between what maybe one might consider corporate. I mean, one way to look at corporate would be that the dispensary 100% owned by a large company, and then the optometrist having an eye exam service only business either within the walls of that or beside. And under the New Look group, we certainly have that model in some of our optical banners that are not Iris, and so that to me makes sense based on sort of those two terms. But Iris to me sits firmly in the middle, trying to grab the best of both sides.
Yeah, I think the concern there, I should, maybe concern is not even the right word. Maybe just the thought there is, with corporate, there's sort of this top down, all of the kind of directive is coming from the top, and then there's loss of autonomy, right? And I think that's where, perhaps whether that's true or not, I think that's where sort of that negative connotation comes from. And so, generally as we're having these conversations, there is a concern that that's going to be the direction that the profession may be heading, to a point where optometrists are losing their autonomy, and therefore wanting that distinction between, what is each entity, what is each corporation's perspective on that?
Yes, I think it depends how you define autonomy. I mean, certainly in our network, our optometrists have full autonomy to practice to the full scope and even specialization based on their personal interests, so long as the brand attributes are maintained and there's some consistency across the network. And for us, we've learned. I mean, because we've been built on an optometrist and actually started in franchising and sort of built up into a partnership model. We know the strength comes from the professionals that are actually in the clinics doing the work and treating the patients. So, we've learned in the past that a top-down approach is really a recipe to finding an organization in danger, because the fragility of having too centralized approach is pretty apparent. You can see it in maybe other industries where you see large giants fall pretty easily based on some mistakes made by people that maybe are disconnected from what goes on in the real world. And we understand that. And in fact, with our partners, we've never been more interactive in terms of hearing from them what it is that works, what doesn't work, and getting their feedback and contribution on how we define the way we operate moving forward, in our clinic. So it's about sharing best practices, but having a scaffolding that's consistent, so that the best practices sometimes are hard to share if the way your clinics run are so different, amongst sort of independent colleagues and things like that. Like how, yes, you can hear something from a colleague that's working, but maybe your clinic isn't set up that way. While in our network, that consistency makes it easy for us to grab a best practice and then roll it out or share it out to everybody, because it's like, oh yeah, well, all those things, all the base things are similar. So any innovations, it's easy to sort of, scale up. And so, yeah, I'm, as I was saying to you, I'm in BC today for a couple of days, meeting with our BC partners. I'll be in Alberta next month, and Ontario in September. And that's exactly what our meetings are about. It's looking at consistent information about the practices, because that's the thing, like having tools that can gather data that maybe an independent practitioner may not have, or you may have the data, but how do you crunch the data? How do you use the data to guide where you're going? And how do you ask questions? And how do you take information with conclusions you think you might have and get feedback from some of the smartest brains that there are in the profession? And those are the ways that you build strength. And certainly, to go center top down. I mean, well, any of us who is on Rogers can just can really have an example of how being top down centralized might put yourself in a much more fragile position than being able to reach into the minds of people that are practitioners who are skilled at what they do and see the effects of everything that you can bring to the table on a daily basis with each patient.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, you mentioned that there's some consistencies or some standardization. I imagine there has to be, of course, in a model like that. What types of things are we looking at there that would be just a few of them, if you want, off the top of your head, that would be standardized?
Yeah, so we're on the same EMR model that we've designed ourselves on an iPad base, and we have a sort of seamless what we call 9-stage patient experience, where all the information gathered from each patient at every touch point is shared on the common platform, so that a patient's never having to say more than once what their problem is. So like once you intake them, they say, hey, I'm having trouble in the distance. They're not going to get asked that same question 5 times. That information seamlessly flows, from intake, pre-test to optometrist, so that patient feels heard. I was heard, they heard me, they're a team, they're working for me. And so that platform just allows for that seamless communication. So in the end, it's really, trying to increase the perceived value of the experience that patient has. So that's one of the consistencies we have to have, and because ultimately that's the promise that our brand is offering to the public. And then when it comes down to sort of the look of location, obviously the name of the location, we try to keep some consistency there. Obviously, there's variations based on whether we've acquired a practice, which looks beautiful, and we don't really want to touch a beautifully renovated practice. So maybe we just change some of the display items that are sort of minor. the product mix. Although we do adapt the product mix somewhat to the market, certainly there are more consistencies across, and ultimately what that comes down to is, to a patient or customer, consistency is actually more valuable even than excellence. I mean, we strive for excellence, certainly. That's in our DNA. And I think most optometrists are overachievers in general. But it's actually very interesting to learn that consistency actually is something more powerful in a market than it is actually excellence. And that could be just shown by a lot of brands that are successful in other industries that you're like, this place is crappy. But you go there because you know what it's like. You expect it. It's comforting to you, and humans like certainty. And I can just personally, because I practice in my partnership location out of Waterloo and 2 days a week, in addition to my leadership roles, I see people migrate from all over the country into my location. They're from BC, they've moved to Ontario, they're from Alberta, they moved to Ontario, and they just wander into our location. And it's just because they're comfortable there, right? So that to us is the power of our network. And yeah, do you give up some of the minutia of variation? Yes, and some of the things there, like you don't control everything as a partner, but certainly you control the quality of care you provide and how you provide that in terms of an optometric clinical skill set and focus. But that platform just gives you so much more sort of power to, we're not worried necessarily about even HR and payroll and POS and inventory and some of the things that it's not so much. Well, some people might find it fun. I personally don't find it fun. I like patient contact. I like really that one-on-one experience with each patient and making sure that you're doing an outstanding job.
Yeah, good. One of the things that's on a lot of people's minds for sure, and I think I've heard you speak about this and perhaps on another podcast or something, is consolidation. Of course, that's something that's been going on for a long time now, but it just seems to be more prominent perhaps as the groups that are consolidating more and getting bigger. So in your mind, being part of one of these groups, do you feel consolidation is necessary, inevitable? I suppose we can say it's inevitable, it's happening already, but is it necessary for optometry in Canada to remain strong? Is it just necessary from a business standpoint? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think the pressures, economic forces, are really pushing us towards more consolidation, and that's getting it's ramping up as challenges are out there, and other organizations are looking for expansion. I mean, we're a very attractive industry from just a pure business standpoint. I mean, you look at the margins that eyewear have, and that people in the financial or general business, they salivate, right? Because these are some good margins. They don't always understand what goes into getting those margins from a service standpoint, but it's a very attractive industry for return on invested capital. And so there's that. And then of course there's just, with that competitive landscape, then it becomes harder to do it on your own. Now, I'm not saying that the whole landscape will consolidate into a major group or brand. I think there's always room for very entrepreneurial and strong independent optometry. But there is certainly, a lot more consolidation to come, and it will certainly hit a plateau. I don't know what that will be, but I don't think it's always going to be 100%. You got to be a part of one group or another. I think there will be a significant chunk of the market like that. And then for the really strong entrepreneurial optometrists, they'll do fine. But you'll have to be strong. There's no resting on your laurels. You're going to have to be a pretty smart business person as well as a professional. And that's not always a hat that someone, can switch up based on what you're trained in school, maybe even how we, determine who makes a good optometrist entering school, right? Is that the skill set that we're recruiting for? I mean, you could be very good in school, 90 percentile and 90% in your classes, but are you entrepreneurial? Can you take the pain of losing money for 3-4 years? Can you grind out like hours like you've never grinded out before, and doing things you've maybe never done before, and learn as you go and take the failure until you get the success? That requires a special kind of grit that maybe doesn't even come from school. Maybe it comes from just how you were raised or what. But that, to me, if you want to remain sort of separate from a larger banner, then that's the kind of skill set that you have to have. And hey, more power to anyone who's got that, because I think that you'll make a pretty strong business for yourself. You just have to love it and love every part of it to do it well, right?
Sure. Absolutely. So in that strong, really strong entrepreneurial person who's built a strong business, they can survive. What happens to everybody else? They either get taken up or they gotta close the doors.
Well, I mean, if you got an existing practice, you got lots of exit opportunities, right? Whether that's with us or others. That the exit strategy for existing practices is pretty robust. You've got lots of choice there, and it's all depends on how you want your legacy to look when you go, and how that transition will look, and what the time frame of that is. A lot of new ODs are not necessarily looking for ownership right away, and they want to have an environment where they've got a team or they're around people that can help mentor them, and so they may find themselves working in different environments in order to find what they like and go from there. I mean, that may be joining a strong entrepreneurial independent practice, that may be joining us and going from an independent contractor into the co-ownership model. I mean, it's to me, it's like if you're new into the profession, you just got to work a lot of different places and figure out where you like to be, and you'll find it. But I think there's always going to be different market segments served by different groups, and then like I said, I think to be independent, you're just going to have to find your niche and be a strong entrepreneur. But then those independent practices may be quite big and have a lot of associate doctors as well. So it's definitely an interesting sort of demographic challenge as the baby boomers sort of move toward retirement, and then we have the millennials and Gen Zs come up. What that's going to look like, but that's why we try to grab the best of both worlds, because lifestyle is also very important to a lot of people, and hard to be an entrepreneur and have a balanced lifestyle. It's not really it's not really a balanced lifestyle kind of thing if you're a really strong independent entrepreneur. So that's where we sort of come in and try to bridge the gap, like build some equity, build some long-term value for yourself, for retirement, or for just having an asset that serves you over time with cash flow and resale value, but also giving you a lifestyle so that you don't have to do everything all the time. And that's where we try to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. So with this consolidation, I suppose one of the big concerns is that you have entities that are so large that they can affect change themselves, right? Is that something that you see as a potential for, with some of the consolidation, with some of the organizations that we have in Canada of creating change, whether it's legislative or other forms that can affect the future of the profession, the direction that we're heading?
Yeah, I think it's always a threat. I mean, no matter what, you can't rest on your laurels. We've worked very hard as a profession and in most provinces to, retain our being independent contractors, always being self-employed, never being an employee. I mean, I don't think there's any province that allows you to be an employee of a corporation, or it's pretty clear in most regulations that that's not something that anyone. It's a no-go zone for everybody. And that's important to maintain. To me, that is why a Canadian Optometry is awesome, is because even if you're in a setting that's a corporate setting beside another optical, you're self-employed, so you get the tax benefits of that, you get the write-offs of that, you get that extra bit of freedom and income that comes from that, and certainly you don't want that to change. So we need to always be vigilant about the regulations that we've, like I said, over the last 10 years have put in place in each province, and make sure that we have a voice in government and at the table, and we're all aligned as much as possible. And I think in Ontario is a great example. Like, honestly, when I moved to Ontario in 2006, it was a kind of a mess, but slowly over time, the leadership that has risen into the association and college, and the association just recently with our coordinated action to renegotiate OHIP. I mean, it's outstanding. And 90, I think it was like 95, 96% participation in the job action, unheard of 10 years prior. Like, no one even thought it could happen. So that type of leadership within the profession, and that aligned everybody. I mean, like our group, all the bigger groups, we're like, yes, this is healthy for optometry to do this. But that's the kind of coordination you need to have to keep, the momentum going in the right direction. And we all have to be vigilant, and we all have to get better at how we strategize those things. And like I said, the Ontario example is a very good one. So yes, there's always going to be forces to change, especially when you've got bigger groups that have a benefit. So we just have to be better in that regard, right? And whether that's through association, colleges, or even individual groups using their resources to make sure that we're defending the status quo from a structural professional regulation standpoint, but allowing for evolution in the ways that we want, through scope expansion and all that. That's critical.
What's up, guys? I just wanted to take a minute to give our exclusive partner for the 2020 podcast, the Future of Optometry series, a shout out here, Aequus Pharma. Aequus is a Canadian pharmaceutical company with a simple mission: scour the globe for the best products and make them accessible to Canadian ECPs. The Evolve Intensive Gel is an artificial tear containing more drops per bottle than any other brand its size. Each drop is 28 microliters, which is the optimal volume for coating the eye without overflow. Its triple action formula contains sodium hyaluronate at the patient-preferred concentration of 0.2%, pure glycerol, which helps to support the lipid layer of the tear film, which is excellent for MGD patients, and cross-linked carbomer 980 that binds moisture to the ocular surface and extends the drop's residency time. As important as what's in the drop is what is not in the drop. The Evolve Intensive Gel is preservative and buffer-free, avoiding phosphates and citrates, which have been shown to sensitize the human conjunctival and corneal cells. So why do ECPs love partnering with Aequus? Because they don't sell directly to patients, nor can their products be found in drugstores or at grocers or on Amazon. Patients can only purchase directly from your clinic or your website. Recommending ECP exclusive brands helps to support our profession, helps to build your practice, keeps your margins healthy, and keeps patients within your continuum of care. There has never been a better time to evolve your practice. To request your product samples, contact your Aequus rep today by emailing contact@aequuseyecare.ca. That's AEQUUS eyecare.ca. And don't forget to put the 2020 podcast in the subject line so they know you heard about them right here. And now back to this episode of the Future of Canadian Optometry series here on the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast, presented by Aequus Pharma. Yeah, I was looking at that. Of course, I know you're quite involved in that. Those earlier changes that happened back in the, I don't know, what year was it? 06, 8, 9, I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, right. I mean, basically, we made a challenge to some of the regs in Ontario. Well, we responded to being taken to task for our business model in 07, and want to come to a settlement in 08, but then the regulations wound up changing on the books in 14 as I think a kicking off that sort of revolution of regulatory change. So 14 in Ontario 2014 was a pretty big year to change, and it created a lot of catch up, because I'll tell you right now, I mean, if you look at sort of markets that may be fertile ground for groups coming from outside of Canada to come in and scoop up market share, there is some risk in Ontario, because optometry, having been on a dispensing fee, no profit model for eyewear, kind of shifted into either these side-by-side models or private practice, which required basically your eye exam fees to be sustaining income levels. And so as a result, optometry doesn't own necessarily eyewear. There's a lot of independent optical. There are a lot of chains there that own eyewear, and eyewear makes up, we're talking $3.2 billion a year in business in Canada, which is almost, I would say, my estimate would be 4 to 5 times what your service revenue is in the country. So that is the powerhouse, right? So having a piece of that is what allows you to determine, your influence in a country and in a province. So that's where, Ontario in 2014 changed, but a lot of catching up has to be done for optometry to grab market share. before somebody else comes and takes it, because that's where things get steered, right? When the big dollars of eyewear are being captured by entities that can wield that resource in a way that maybe is not favorable to the profession. That's where the race is on. So other provinces obviously have their challenges. I know BC, certainly there's more of an open regulatory environment there, and I think the best defense is an offense in terms of getting stronger presence and being competitive and making it about eye care first. And but then, for instance, you look at Quebec. I mean, they're protected by language, but optometry has really a significant portion of, well, the majority of the eyewear market there. So they really do steer the ship, and they keep everybody out. But they've got some advantages that a lot of us don't have from a language perspective.
So you're saying we should all just start speaking French?
Well, no, maybe, but there'd have to be rules around companies.
Yeah. There's a whole other. That's a whole can of worms we don't want to open.
That's right.
You mentioned BC. You mentioned some of the regulatory changes here. In that period of time when you were involved in those changes in Ontario, that was favorable to. I mean, in that case, it was Iris getting called out for the way that Iris was behaving in that market that they were not supposed to. But it worked out to the benefit of optometry, right? That Iris was doing something that generally was going to help optometry. But a similar type of thing happened in BC, where a corporation was doing something. They were getting called out for doing, whatever, acting a certain way that wasn't according to regulations. And then they took that to court. And unfortunately, that's where the deregulation happened, right? Clearly was performing in a way that they were not supposed to, and they ended up getting the regulations changed. And that's where definitely someone who's practiced in BC their whole career, that's where my concern would lie. If I'm going to make this a bit more personal, is if a corporation were to come in and say, well, you know what, these regulations are not working to my benefit, and the changes that they want to make are not to the benefit of the profession as a whole, how difficult would it be to stop a large organization from making those changes? And here it looked like that was really early in my career, so I didn't really see the inner workings of it. But from what I saw, it seemed like kind of a steamroll. There wasn't a whole lot of stopping that. So how do we fortify ourselves now? You mentioned kind of best defense is offense, or however you said it, but like, what do optometrists need to do to kind of batten down the hatches and be prepared for potential regulatory changes like that in the future?
Yeah, well, in BC, it was interesting because we could probably do a whole podcast on it and dissect it. But it was really a political coup d'etat. I mean, when you start to track the people, the players, where they were, and they were in positions of political influence, and there was a plan. I mean, it's not like they just came in there and went all willy-nilly and then expected, to win a corp house. They had their political ducks lined up. They really did. And I can tell you that's that's something the profession has to do as well. I mean, it really, it's important to get yourself in those rooms, in those conversations, connected to the right political people in various ways, to be able to be, there to affect change. And I could tell you, in Ontario, what happened is, exactly that. Because we were kind of on our own in some ways, because there wasn't necessarily the same push to allow optometrists to work with opticians and to sell for retail, in the colleges and maybe a bit more the associations at the time. But anyway, our strategy it was very, very diverse, in the sense that I had a lobbyist that I was working with who got me in to meet with some of the key bureaucrats, because sometimes the politicians change, but the bureaucrats stay the same, and they often hold the power of a file. So you need to get to know these people more than necessarily the politician in some respects, because then and they're like, I mean, I don't want to speak ill of government bureaucrats, but they like to be spoon-fed information. Like, they don't want to have to work for it. You don't go into government because you're a hard-working entrepreneur. You want the easy schedule, and I could say that both my parents were civil servants, so I can say that. But yeah, like they want the goods on. If they have a file, they want someone to spoon feed them, and they also want it spoon fed to them in the framework at which they're working. So if they've got like some kind of a mandate, you've got to put, what deliver the information that aligns with their mandate to make them look smart when they're talking to, the politician or whoever is in their department. So there's that aspect. There's different sort of regulatory arms that are always like, they're gathering reports. You got to get in there and get those connections and deliver that. At the same time, it was a different media landscape when we were doing all this, but we had a proactive sort of PR strategy that was very effective at the time. Now, the media is different now than it was back then. But at the time, we were able to, really leverage, when we started to get into conflict, we were able to leverage the media to our favor. And that's a particular skill set, and it takes a lot of plans and coaching and the right thing. And then, of course, the legal aspect, and the legal aspect is certainly the most costly. And we had to build I actually have in my office, it's a point of pride, I've got volumes of our charter challenge litigation. Like, it's just like lined up, because it was like a year of my life, where we were just researching down to building this legal case under the Charter of Rights. And again, the legal landscape may have changed as well since that time. But the bottom line is, you need like multiple strategies, into the halls of power to just even keep things how you've made them, right? If there's other forces coming in, you gotta get there. So it's hard because the profession is not necessarily huge in terms of dollars collected, something like that, but also too with the larger groups like myself and others, working collaboratively together in some aspect is important too. Like for us to, like in Quebec, it's more. They're more organized in that way, in which a lot of the major eye care groups, they're competitors in the marketplace, but they're like, whoa, the regulation, we got to make sure that, they don't go too crazy and make it hard for us to operate our businesses. So let's all get together and have some common things that we want to make sure that the government is not going to, hammer us or surprise us with. And that's a model that really we should be looking at in other provinces too, if we want to be more effective, because the government also likes alignment. They don't like anti-competitive activity necessarily. Like, they like, if we can all set our differences aside in the eye care industry and be like, okay, whoa, all of us want the same thing here. Like, this is what we want. Look, we're all aligned. Look, we have all this mobilization. Just like when with the Ontario Association doing their OHIP negotiation, we're all aligned. They're like, wow, we can't divide these people. We're done. Like, we're done. We can't do anything. We're gonna have to go to the table, right? Because we can't split them up and make that person, want something different and upset. Like that alignment is very powerful, and I think that's going to be incumbent on us to set differences aside, based on our different models, if we want to keep eye care as it is right now, which, like I said, is I believe it's in a very healthy place, on a regulatory level.
Right. So, with potential forces entering the market, mm-hmm. and potentially causing those or looking to make those kind of regulatory changes, it's one thing to look at the entity, the large kind of entity, but then I'm always curious about the optometrists that choose to work with those entities. And I'm not picking on anybody here, but like generally speaking, if we are looking here, we're speaking about us being collective as a profession and wanting to strengthen our profession and want to do what's best for the long term, for our profession, for the optometrists who choose to work for these entities who potentially are looking to do the opposite. How do you feel, or what would you say to someone if you were talking to somebody who was working at one of these places? So it's all theoretical, right, Daryan? I'm just in theory. What would you say?
Yeah, I certainly don't judge anyone based on where they choose to practice. I think that you always got to go where your values are aligned, right? And you need to look inside yourself and say, well, what values do I have, and also what long-term future do I see for myself, and where I'm at contributing to that potential future, because certainly if the future puts you less in charge of your life, less self-employed and maybe an employee and working not to your, with your autonomy or to the scope of the practice you want to, then you got to think about long-term, what is going to support that that level of autonomy and practice, stuff like that, and decide what environment you want to be in that does that. It's tough because you come out of school now, lots of debt. You got a lot of bills to pay, and not necessarily looking to go further in the hole to start a business. Not everybody, and some people do, and they more power to them. But yeah, it's about aligning yourself based on values, and that's, to me, that pretty much kind of gives you the answer. If your values are short term, I'm just gonna earn a lot and the profession be damned, and it doesn't matter what 5 years will bring for me. If I'm just gonna make hay while the sun shines, then if you do that, you may reap the results of that, right? So I think that we all have to think long term, because it's not just one thing for us to be in a great place now, but we want to be this in 10 years in a better place, or at the very least the same if it's great right now. So it's I'm not sure if I'm answering the question necessarily the way you asked it, but yeah, I for myself too, like when I was young, I came out, I'm like, I didn't know anything. I was just like, I want to learn business. So I practiced in so many different environments to find out, find out what I like, B, what is there find a mentor that would, really sort of, fill the gap that was left with school. And by sampling different places, I landed where I wanted to be. And that evolved too. Like in my experience, I was just like, okay, this is a pretty cool environment. I like these people, and I found a mentor in Francis Jean, the founder, and I really sort of played it cool for a while, and practiced not full time, and just sort of decided what I want, and then I just got inspired and learned more about where I was, and my career took a trajectory that was natural and comfortable, and well, not comfortable, but like natural and exciting, and felt like fun more than it did work, right? So that's the key there, is to get on these journeys, but think about the long term. Like, don't think about what's going to give me the best opportunity long term, what's going to put me in the best position of autonomy long term. And to do that, you're not alone, because like you said, there's lots of market forces, lots of groups coming in. So what situations are going to make me happy in this situation? And I'd hope that it would be in the one where you have some freedom to practice. So.
That question actually was sort of off the cuff. I had questions related to that for later in the conversation, but since we're on the topic now, since I derailed myself, I'm gonna just move on to the same topic. With new grads, you mentioned it. Coming out of school with a lot of debt. That's nothing new. The debt may be a little higher now than it used to be, but that's always been the case. And one thing that's different to me anyways, maybe you can confirm or deny this, is that new grads there's a lot more demand right now for ODs. And, with the growing other organizations or the consolidation, whatever it might be, the salaries that they're being offered, or the signing bonuses, or there's forgivable loans now that are being offered as incentives to try to draw primarily new grad in, but even, other ODs in, to try to kind of, sequester these ODs so you can have the manpower to run these businesses. Of course, there's second and third order effects on other businesses and other practices when that kind of thing is happening. But specifically with these new grads, do you think that they're actually in a place of power and leverage because they're getting all this money thrown at them? Or do you think that they're perhaps just being influenced and almost blinded, or at least they're obscured a little bit by the money, and their path maybe potentially negatively affected by what they're being offered, and they're not seeing past that because of like the simple math of I have debt and I need money, and that kind of thing happening?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a mix of both, because I think that where there's a lot of demand is in remote areas, right? Like, it's if somebody wants to live in or practice in a major urban center, there's no shortage of other optometrists looking for the same, right? It's like the market is more saturated. But as soon as you go outside the city, the demand is huge, because those populations are usually underserved, and there's usually harder to get optometrists to be there. So in those sort of more remote areas, yeah, there's definitely more demand than there is supply, and that is a power position for a new grad or a young optometrist. When it comes to these, all these sort of the bonuses and things like that, yeah, I mean, it's getting pretty tough out there for that. We've certainly kept competitive in the market when it comes to some of those things, but we really like it. I mean, for us, it's always about culture and about fit and about values, and it really starts to make us feel uncomfortable when we start to lose, maybe an optometrist takes another position because they got a signing bonus that was bigger or something like that, and we're like, yeah, I mean, we could pay for that, for try to outbid, but then what is that? What kind of person are we getting that is like, this is the start of our relationship? It's a bidding war to get you into our relationship. We've always been about, okay, well, do you feel like there's a fit with our culture? Do you share our values of passion, honesty, respect? Like, do you like this environment? Like, is this family feel that we have, is that something that you're going to feel good about in 10 years? That's what we want. We want that alignment. Like, it sucks when you're out there and there's, all this money being thrown around, and we're like, it doesn't even feel like that great as an investment, because that same, if you put yourself as a person as, I'm going to the highest bidder, then how long are you really going to stay until someone else flashes some money? And then in the end, how long does that last? Maybe the dynamics change, and suddenly it's like, yes, you've taken a couple of great sort of signing bonuses for favorable loans, but then now maybe you're, the dynamic changes in the market, and you're like, suddenly now who's going to be in a position to have a good spot? It's somebody who's been loyal, someone who fits with the values of the practice, and like someone that hasn't taken necessarily advantage of this point in time, right? So now is one thing, but what does 5 to 10 years look like? And there's money doesn't necessarily buy happiness, so it's it looks great in the beginning, but ultimately you got to feel like when you get up and go to work every day that you're not even working, that you're having fun, and that's sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Being paid a large sum of money and not being happy, being miserable, yeah, never a good trade. So
Yeah. That was a question that I actually just was asking myself, was like, how long will this last? Because it seems to have happened very quickly.
mhm.
And I wonder how long this little blip, if it's a blip, how long it'll last, and then what it's going to look like on the other side. For ODs and for the market in general, when all this money's been thrown around and people are put in positions that perhaps they're not happy in. I wonder if there's a correction, what that looks like. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Unless you have some foresight on that, I'm happy to hear it.
No, I wish I did, honestly. But I do, like, I will say, just as you said, like, it's like anything, it's going to have to correct at some point, because it's not sustainable. Like, nobody can keep paying these things out and indefinitely, and then again, ultimately, there will be like a return to hey, maybe I shouldn't be going to the highest bidder. Maybe I should go into the environment that I want to practice in. Like,
Yeah, well, I
maybe
guess the pendulum always swings, right? So
yeah.
perhaps it's all the way on one side, and maybe it'll go all the way the other way when people are not looking for money. I don't know if that's realistic, but they're just looking for like that really enjoyable workplace setting. It'll be interesting to see how far it swings back.
Yeah, and for us, our strategy has always been the same in terms of creating an environment and values that are clear, so that somebody knows what they're getting into, or feels a particular way in our locations, and is that alignment or not. And that was always put in there from the beginning, because we know that there's so much, like you said, the pendulum swings all the time, and the market does crazy things. And if you're not consistent, then yeah, you can get yourself tangled up. So like, we've always tried to keep this sort of straight and narrow. This is who we are. This is our identity. We got to sometimes remind ourselves this is our identity. This is who we are, so that there's not that variation, and that like we attract those that have that sort of similar DNA, or that similar depth.
Yeah, makes sense. So you mentioned earlier about the perceived value of the services that you provide, right? Let's just talk generally here, that we all provide.
Mhm.
It's one thing if a patient's in the office already, right? And you got your pathways all set, and you know that you have great service and that kind of thing. And then the patient feels that value as they're going through the process. But what about a patient who's not yet in the office and they're still choosing where to go? like just to the public in general, how does that person in the public determine, the value that this optometrist will perhaps provide? And then how does the optometrist try to show the public that they're going to provide the most value?
Yeah, so I mean, perceived value is always where the customer, the patient, receives more than they've feel they've received more than they've paid for, right? So you need to always deliver more than what the dollar sign at the end of the day shows, and that's increasing perceived value. So people are like, wow, okay, that was maybe that was expensive, but wow, that was amazing, right? Like you don't feel bad about it. You're like, I felt like they treated me well. This was great. My doctor spent time with me, answered my questions. They had great equipment. They understood. They listened to my needs. They solved my needs. They got me this great pair of glasses. I'm happy, and the dollars didn't matter because they really over delivered what I expected. So I think execution in your location with the idea of that person must feel like they received more than they've paid is critical, and it's better to do that by increasing what you deliver instead of decreasing what they pay, because that'll get you in some pretty tight spots. Although that is a segment that you have to doesn't require some lower cost options. But it's in terms of getting out there, word of mouth is still number one. Like honestly, you could spend infinite amounts of money in marketing. Infinite. There's no shortage of places where you can just blow money in marketing. Number one's always word of mouth. So focus on what you're doing every day in your location first, because that person will talk about what their experience is if it's great, and that person will bring more people in, right? So that's critical. I think if you want to keep your finances tight, don't overspend on marketing. Just make sure you have an amazing outcome for every one of your patients, and then naturally things like Google reviews and stuff will flow from that. Like you just focus on the patient. Just give that patient what is an amazing experience. Secondary to that, then it becomes okay, now it's a game of how do you get exposure out there in a noisy place with devices disrupting attention, and it is tough, and one of the reasons why we aligned around a brand is that brands are simpler to, when you build them up, they're additive, they cut through noise, they're a much more, once they've developed a trust level in the perception of the market, then it becomes easier because people are like, oh, where do I go? Okay, I know this place, I'm going there, right? Because we're just bombarded with all sorts of things. Other than that, I don't have the recipe when it comes to marketing. Honestly, it's we're still working through, and it changes. Honestly, the landscape has changed in 10 years where you could put millions of dollars, what it's going to yield, right? And so we've got constantly revising strategies all the time, because it's not always certain what's going to work, and different markets have different things that work for them. So getting out there, it's tough. It's not I don't think it's any easier if you're a large group. You've got more money, but you could waste that money pretty easily, right? If you're not smart about it. So the core always comes back to word of mouth. Word of mouth is always the most effective advertising that you can have. And then the rest of it, it's a learning process. And I wish I had the secret sauce, because that would make my life easier too.
It would make all our lives easier. We'd be having to talk a lot more offline about that secret sauce. But in a place where potentially there's going to be a lot of talk about lower cost eye exams, or let's just say if a patient was standing there, potential patient standing there looking at, this place is charging me $50 for an eye exam, and this place is charging me $150. How do you think that patient's going to make that decision? Is it going to be look based on technology? Is it going to be more so on word of mouth, like you said? Is it going to be, a certain patient just going to say, I just don't have more than $50, I have to go to this place? It's just going to be a mix of all of those things.
Yeah, it is going to be a mix of all those things. I mean, and it just depends on what population your practice is positioned to serve, right? Because if you are positioned to serve a lower income population, then yeah, you're going to have to get competitive on your pricing, because that's one of the biggest determinations of what maybe some people have in terms of what their ability to pay is. I mean, that's just a reality. If you're positioned for trying to get somebody who's maybe a little more affluent client, or someone that at least under wants to have, like, is desiring a good experience, then it comes down to the game of word of mouth and the game of reputation. And one of the advantages an independent has too is that you can get out in the community and meet a lot of people. Really, I mean, you can be a social butterfly in your community and raise yourself to a pretty well-known sort of presence there, and that's also very helpful when people sort of see you around and that you're committed to local community stuff. That's always great for sure. But yeah, it's tough because, like, if somebody only has price in which to make their decision, yeah, they may start at the lower price point before they realize, hey, that didn't feel very good. They didn't spend very much time with me. These glasses are kind of crappy. They're falling apart. Like, it does initially when you get like a wave of low cost options. I think there are a lot of people that try it out, and then it starts to, it may hurt short term for some people, and then some of the patients or customers say, well, I didn't really like that experience. I'm going to go back to where I'm used to. And now I know why I pay more there. Mm-hmm. But you got to justify, like, that's the thing. Like, that's why I come back to the experience you give in your practice, because if you were charging $150 and that patient didn't feel like that you listened to them, didn't feel like you explained everything, didn't feel like they got, good value for that $150, then you're at risk to lose that person for a $50 exam, because they're just like, well, why am I paying $150? This was a terrible experience. I didn't feel important at all. So, like, I'm out. I'm going to try it cheaper next time, because, and I dare say, and I'm not trying to critique anybody, but I dare say there probably are practices where the $150 exam is like a $50 experience, right? And then it's like, yes, you're at risk. That practice is at risk. So you just make sure, you got to up your level of experience in the location so that people know what they're paying for. But yeah, short term, there will be some, for sure, there's always disruption when a big player with lower pricing maybe comes in and people get curious and then they go out there. So then it's just incumbent upon us to tighten up our ship, and do better.
So with your kind of vast, experience here across the country, how much do you think a high quality, really high service eye exam should cost?
I think that's a difficult question because there's a lot of regional differences. Like, our pricing is different per province. Typically, it all, what the dollar sign actually doesn't really matter. It is literally the value that you can deliver that exceeds that dollar sign, and that's not an exact science, right? That is like, okay, what is it that we're able to do for each of our patients and customers. And if we charge X, do they still feel like, awesome, that's worth it? And there's a bit of calibrating that happens there, right? You introduce some new equipment into your practice. Okay, you should charge for it 100%. Like, to me, since the beginning of my career, you charge for what you're worth. You invest in equipment, you charge. You invest in yourself to be, the top of your game clinically, you charge. Your time is worth something. Your expertise is worth something. You charge. Don't ever discount the services that you provide, but you gotta explain that value to the patient in a way they get it. You got to be a good communicator. You got to figure out how to take your brain from optometry school level science into layperson, maybe cuss words if you're working in a industrial environment. I don't know. Like, it really is about adjusting your communication style to your patients, the way they connect to, right? And so as a result, like, it's a tough question for me to answer, because it's like, if you can deliver like a $300 perceived value and only charge $200, then your exam should be $200, right? But how do you deliver that value? That is the ultimate challenge, and that's the journey that you're on. If you want to keep your prices healthy and high, you got to go, okay, we got to deliver more than that, right? More than that. And the good examples, I mean, all of us we used to before the shutdown, go on vacations. And if you pick like a really luxury hotel or luxury resort, like, there are things that they do that are little things that may actually not cost them very much, that you're like, wow, yeah, they treat me like a queen or a king, right? Like you're just like, this is awesome. And the per night, charge is not low at all. But because they've been able to sort of give you this experience, you're okay with it, right? And so there are many examples in many industries like that, where they just like little things here and there build value that far exceed the dollar, and they reap the rewards. And I think we can all sort of learn from that, as because in the end, and it's, I believe it's a strength, not a weakness, is that because optometry has got private. A lot of private revenue into it. It to me, that's exciting, because it gives us, you have a green field in terms of like what you can do to increase perceived value and revenue coming into your location. While as if you're always having to bill the government or ask the government for fees, it's like, how do you? It's tough to evolve, right? So it's I hope that answered the question. I kind of went off a little bit. But.
No, that's, what, that's funny. I asked that question. This is part of the reason why I wanted to do these things recorded and one at a time and not put them all out, right? Because this is one of those questions that makes everyone uncomfortable. And it's, I wouldn't want, I don't know if it would happen, but I wouldn't want one person, let's say you watched one of the other interviews. Oh yeah, he answered like that. I think I got a better answer. I don't know if that would happen, but that was part of the reason why I did that. And with this one, I'm not exactly looking for a number, to be honest with you. I'm looking to, you said it yourself, and I love that you said it, in your own words, of it's about us as the service providers, making sure we value our services and charge accordingly for them, right? If somebody's coming in and deliberately lowering the cost of their eye exams, it's not only devaluing the service of that particular provider, but I think of the entire profession and all other providers, by saying we are technically providing just an eye exam and we're charging half of what the other people are charging. But really, like you said, well, every hotel is giving you a bed to sleep in, right? Mm-hmm. But the experience of that hotel, of that resort is totally different, leaves you feeling like a king or a queen, and they charge accordingly. And so that's how we should look at our services too. So thank you for answering that. Whether you put a dollar number on it or not is not important. So let's I want to see quickly which question I wanted to jump to here. I think we've already actually answered that one. So one of the really direct questions that I wanted to ask everybody is, when I put that call out into the world a couple of months back, it was, okay, Iris or FYI or whoever, I see that you are providing opportunities to optometrists or new graduates and whatever, and you are opening these stores or consolidating. But really, what's happening to make the profession better? What is Iris doing to make the profession better in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, in the long term, we've always been, as I was talking about earlier, like we've always been about raising perceived value of eye care and eye care services specifically. We're actually, it's interesting because you talk about maybe a divergence between optometrists and sort of business people or whatever, but like since the very beginning of Iris, we've always been encouraging our optometrists, charge more, you're worth more. And it's usually our optometrists that don't necessarily want to like go there, at least historically, right? So for us, always, like we've always promoted quality eye care. We've always been about that's ensuring that the public knows that that's worth something. It's worth paying for quality eye care experience, quality technology and products. So whenever we are messaging in a way that is always educational and about, assigning a high value to your vision and your eye care. And so in terms of the impact on the market, I think you can even see it historically. When I came to BC in 2001, I think something like, I think it was like 60% of ophthalmic lenses sold were uncoated, something like that. It was a really high number. We went to fully coated lenses. That was our thing. We were like fully coated. We don't sell, like at the very odd occasion we would sell an uncoated lenses, but we went crazy in terms of like, let's 100% fully coated. Anti-reflection coating is better for vision. We're doing it, and we did it, and we hit that message hard. and we did it in our locations. We have a significant presence in BC, and a few years later, overall the industry, it was easier for everyone to sell antireflective coating, and it raised the penetration of that significantly. And as you know, as an owner of a practice, coated lens, price points more, you do better with it, right? And maybe some people listening to this are like, uncoated lenses, what are you talking about? Who sells those?
Yeah,
right?
what is that even?
Yeah, well, what is an uncoated lens? Why would you sell an uncoated lens? It's like, well,
Yeah.
back in the day, yeah, you did, and we pushed it, and we were fine. We brought the industry up because we're like, yeah, like we'll always be willing to push if it benefits our patients, and put our machinery behind it, and everyone will benefit, because we'd rather have the general sort of value of eye care go up in quality, because it just makes it easier for us too, right? So that's always been what we've done. I mean, and in terms of equipment too, we like to be scaling up on our equipment. We're rolling out our OCT program. We're doing innovations like teleoptometry in underserved areas. So on a technology level, we've been involved in some AI projects as well. So we take our resources, and not only in terms of improving the perception in the marketplace, but even on the technology side, we've got some relationships with some schools that we'll be announcing coming up. Like we're giving back to education on the technology research side, and really that benefits everybody ultimately, and that's good. I mean, we'd rather have everybody doing better than us to have a divergence in the market where it's people are pulled different ways, because again, perceived value is everything. That's the public will always look at you differently if they see you as, okay, yeah, that person's an optometrist, they help people see better. My eyewear, my eyes are so important. That is worth something. So when you charge for your services, people respect you. They respect your profession, and I think it all sort of spills over into all these different elements. Including what we talked about earlier in terms of like being politically active and things like that, right? If the politicians who are members of the public, or the bureaucrats who are members of the public, perceive the profession highly, then when they meet with you, they're like, okay, I'm meeting with an optometrist. Okay, this is good. This is somebody I should listen to.
Yeah. And do you, with Iris being part of a larger group, do you feel that same mentality and same progress is going to maintain over the longer term, or like, is there a chance that being part of a larger entity will change that course of the way that Iris is, placed within the profession?
No, I don't think so, because we occupy a pretty interesting niche in the Canadian landscape. We really are unique globally, and what we do has actually been pretty well recognized in other countries as pretty outstanding. Even when it came to things like the fully coated lenses that I mentioned earlier, which like that, when we moved to that model where we were pretty much 99%, 99.5% fully coated, like that resonated like globally. They're like, what? This group is doing what? So for us, that's the attractiveness of our group. We've always been this sort of forward thinking fusion of business and optometry, and we're known in terms of the financial sort of community as like strong operators. And as long as we can continue to cultivate good leadership and partnerships in our group that are the perfect sort of fusion of optometry and business, we will continue to that path, because that is what we are. Like there's just changing what we're doing doesn't make any sense, because it's always been somewhat looked at globally as a leader position. And to me, it would be very weird for someone to say, wow, that they're doing all these things that no one's doing, let's change it. Like, doesn't make any sense, right? So
Yeah.
And ultimately, in terms of our financial ownership structure, it's all it's all financial. It's nothing to do with like the operate. And that's, I think, the general consensus in the larger business world is like, okay, well, if I'm a pension fund and I want to invest in a good business, I don't know anything about this. They're good. Let them do their thing, right? And that's what we've always done. And that's part of also being decentralized as partners too. Is it's a bit of insurance, because if ever something crazy happened on a central level, partners could just be like, I'm not doing that. Like you have an ownership stake in a local corporation with rights. Like, pretty tough to go against that if something crazy was happening. All these things are decentralized. Like the whole company could collapse under bankruptcy, and our partners will be fine because that company is insulated from everything, and they would just wind up owning 100% of the practice for cents on the dollar if something were to happen. So that's why I like our system, because it is anti-fragile, it is decentralized, and for those of you who follow financial markets, those are things that a lot of businesses talk about, because we've seen the impact of when you're fragile and centralized, a lot, and it's not good. So anyway,
yeah, no, absolutely. I think, the overarching kind of concern there is a large organization perhaps deciding that they want to change their not business model, but like perhaps the market's not quite working the way they want it to. They want to change something about it, and then again, it's not aligning with the profession. Is kind of the concern that maybe I'm trying to express with you here. Obviously, on a local level, it's great that the optometrist has the ability to do what they want to do, but it's that larger entity with the potential power to change things in the industry that is more the concern. So what do you think, what do you think Iris looks like, or New Look looks like 10 years from now?
Yeah, 10 years from now, I mean, we certainly will have more significant presence in each province in the country. Certainly with Iris, it's about gathering partnerships with optometrists and opticians through merger acquisition. The other banners the same, but more on the market segments that they service. So we will certainly have significant growth, and for us, as we get bigger into a market and sort of more financially benefiting, some of the things you and I just talked about are things that we want to do, like more political activity to ensure we keep the industry and profession strong, because we believe it is strong. Like, honestly, that's what everything's been built on, is this strength. So we cannot see that go down, and we do talk a lot about how we ensure the future long term. We also look at the demographies of things and how we service populations. So yeah, it's, as we get bigger, we'll have more resources to do more things, and we are optometrics centered. So that is the core of who we are, and we need to always do things to strengthen the profession, and just, I mean, our track record is there, right? Like when I challenged the regulations in Ontario, I mean, that was not an inexpensive endeavor at all. We spent a lot of money to do that, and it benefited everybody. I mean, and so that has always been the ethos of the organization, because otherwise you can't build our business model. Doesn't work any other way, really.
Yeah. I mean, a cynical person might say that, of course, it benefited Iris, and so it made sense. And Iris had the power and the funding or money to do something like that, where others who might have wanted to do the same didn't have the ability to do it. So, of course, it's wonderful that it benefited the profession as a whole, and that's always what we want to see. But the concern, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, is if those goals don't align, the profession and that individual entity don't align, that's where things could get a little bit scary, and that's where we need to be more cautious.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'll get you out of here on this, Daryan. I've taken up a lot of your time, and you've been very generous with answering all these questions. What do you see? So you've told me kind of what Iris was going to look like, or 10 years or so from now. What do you think the individual optometrist's job is going to look like 10 or 20 years from now? Is it going to be the same, walking in, doing a refraction, doing a health check, go outside and buy glasses? Or is it going to be remote in some capacity? Is there going to be some other technology you see down the pipeline that's going to change the way we practice dramatically? Feel free to be as dramatic as you want. What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, I do think that there's certainly going to be a lot of delegation, whether that be to technicians or to AI in some ways too, right? Because I think ultimately you'll wind up an optometrist wind up reading a lot of data being processed by artificial intelligence to deliver you sort of a probability of something or that, and it's up to us to make our judgment call based on these data inputs. I really think it's going to be like that. I mean, it's already, when you look at an OCT, and especially over a couple of visits of history, you are looking at like essentially trends and graphs and things like that. So as AI is able to reach into more data sets and compare, I think it'll make it very interesting, because then we'll look at all this information, we'll have to draw our own conclusions, and ultimately communicate that to the patient. So we may be less in terms of our like physical, doing the exam, and more about reading the inputs from all of these scans and different instruments that we'll be using. Definitely I think teleoptometry will be much bigger, because there's a lot of underserved communities, and really it's tough to get people out there. I mean, I think there definitely should be a strategy amongst schools to recruit optometrists from remote communities, so that they return to them, because that ultimately is better. Because one of the other aspects, I think, of what optometry will be doing is just more expanded scope medical things. So you may find yourself, doing a lot of emergency or more medically based, treating as well. So you need to have some physical presence in these locations, and being remote isn't going to cover all the bases yet. I mean, maybe they'll have some like robotic arms that you can use through the metaverse to be able to pull out foreign bodies or do some more invasive procedure. But it's definitely, the demand for our medical side is going to be continuing to expand, because there's just less and less ophthalmology, and certainly like even just like they're doing in Oklahoma with being able to do like YAG caps and like PRK and things like that. I mean, it's just the natural evolution of what we'll be doing. So it's pretty exciting as a profession that there are all these sort of interface with technology and things that will move forward. But that's the way I see it. I mean, I feel like the human connection is always going to be, to me, priority number one, and that's what I think that all optometrists should realize, that they need to be able to listen to a person, explain complex things to them, put it into context, address their needs. The communication and the psychology and the that aspect of things is going to be probably even more important as you're able to use technology to do some of the diagnostic. You need to be able to like break it all down and be a human and build that connection with people, because I mean, no matter what, humans are humans. They need to feel like they're cared for, feel like they're listened to, feel like they're trusted and not judged. And that's the key, I think, to building a long-term relationship with a patient, or anybody really.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any final words before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered a lot of territory, but yeah, thank you for having me. It was, I certainly had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Dr. Daryan Angle. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for answering these questions, being part of this conversation, which I think is going to be an important kind of big conversation across the country, in the coming months. And thank you everybody who's been watching and listening to this series, The Future of Canadian Optometry, on Canada's #1 optometry podcast, the 2020 podcast. And I will see you again in the next episode. Take care, guys. Okay, guys, so there it was. That was the second installment, the second interview in the Future of Canadian Optometry series presented by Aequus Pharma here on the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I hope you're able to take away a lot of insights, just like I was from Dr. Daryan Angle here, who was very open to answering a lot of these questions and facing them head on. Again, don't forget to share these insights. Don't forget to share these videos or the audio with your friends and colleagues across the country. I think this is a conversation we all of us Canadian optometrists need to be part of. Again, don't forget to share this, guys. Take a screenshot, throw it up on Instagram, put a post on LinkedIn, send a text to your friend. Maybe more importantly, send the link over so they can listen to it or watch it on YouTube. And again, don't forget to send me your feedback. If there's other questions that you want me to follow up with, other questions that we should be asking, I'd love to hear them so we can continue to challenge the status quo and make sure that we are all involved in the direction that our profession is heading in. And remember, every Tuesday and Friday for the next few weeks, we will be releasing new interviews, new episodes that are part of the Future of Canadian Optometry series presented by Aequus Pharma. I'll see you next week in the next episode.